Okay, good evening, everybody. I'm not sure if I 100% agree with the organizer's policy to keep the very last and the best presentation for the last, but given the fact that you're all still here, it's probably not that bad of a policy. I will try to do my best to make sure you're not wasting your time here. And hello, Dylan. Nice to see you. For the past 13 years, I've been working with NGOs and academic institutions to help them to put their academic research and their digital objects online and accessible for free. I've been doing that together with a team of 28 people of Atmire. We are a spin-off of the KU Leuven University, and just in respect to our hosts, ULB and KU Leuven are both two very good, respectable universities. In my talk today, I will first, I was a little bit afraid that Emily was going to say practically 100% of what I'm going to bring to you, so there's a little bit of overlap, but I will also comment a little bit on the state of academic publication today. Before then, talking about the DSpace community and institutional repositories and how they fit into this picture. And the last part, that's the part that is a little bit technical, but I don't go into detail too much, is how the DSpace community, as a mature community, how they currently tackle a very big overhaul of discontinuing two existing UIs and introducing a new UI to replace the two legacy ones. But first, because it's been such a long day, I know that maybe all of those papers and all the information is kind of a blur when you're back in your rooms or hotel rooms tonight, is that if I just want to give you one idea to take away today, is that everybody in the room, or everybody, not us Atmire, but everybody here, really has the potential to accelerate scientific progress just by contributing to getting the results of scientific research, both positive and negative, into the hands of more people quicker. And the speed there compared to researchers who are just in their lab trying to make their claim and their scope as big as possible and just sit on their data for years. That's just something that makes me cry. So, but it's a very difficult trade-off. So currently in that communication of results, how fast are we already going today, or so? What's the state of the art? Let's take you back to the pre-internet age, where the publishers basically had marginal cost to print an issue of a journal and also take the distribution cost to get these journals out to the libraries. In that kind of marginal cost scenario, they currently don't have that anymore, because due to the internet, it can go a lot faster than what it was then. That I also wanted to mention, in that old model, authors didn't have to pay to get their research published, but also, as it is today, authors didn't get paid to send their research into the copyright of the publishers neither. And the publishers made their margins, or they recovered their costs by selling the subscriptions to the libraries. When I go online today, and especially when we are looking at this threatening development of the coronavirus, I see prestigious journals and publishers making their content available for free, apparently also instantly. So if we think about the discussions that we had about the review, apparently The Lancet has pages on there, Elsevier has pages on there, so somehow they have found the time to review or to make sure that this content is accessible online, which is an amazing development, and kind of makes me wonder, like, okay, we're there, the problem is solved, and it's even solved due to the generous help of the publishers, those benevolent actors in our space. But let me ask you this before I continue. Can you raise your hands if you know somebody today who has been diagnosed with the coronavirus? Anybody already? It would be kind of scary. But can you now raise your hands if you know somebody who's been diagnosed with a form of cancer? It's a lot more people. So when I want to read this recent article, February, so it's a very recent article in Clinical Oncology, and if I'm not privileged to be on the network of an institution that pays for this, then I need to pay $40 for an article. And if you're approaching this as somebody who has a family member who's affected, my point of view is always like, look, it's only when I get to the PDF that I can assess whether it's relevant or interesting in my case. So I kind of want to look at maybe 100 of these PDFs, and maybe one of them will contain something useful. So it's totally not helping me or helping people who don't have an institutional subscription. But when I go to the page of this journal, it actually says immediately under the title of the journal, it says supports open access, and then I click on it and they say that support actually means that we allow authors the privilege to pay for to pay an article publishing charge. So basically, we as the publisher, we do open access and closed access, and if you as an author don't take the paid open access option, then you're the bad guy who doesn't want to set your article free. That wouldn't really be a problem if these fees were like $50 or maybe a couple of $100, but in some of the journals, it's like thousands of dollars for an article. And I was very happy to hear that Journal of Open Source Software said that they don't charge either the author and also not the reader, so that's great. So we're kind of in this weird hybrid mode. If I access a page like this, just Googling, hitting this page, that as a reader, I don't understand why for article Y, there's like a green button says open access. I can download it. Then there's one that I can pay. It's not even tied to the identity of the journal anymore. So the question on whether we have solved the problem or not, I think there's still a space where improvements can be made. And one example, and I took the screenshot a couple of days ago, but apparently now there's already, I think, hundreds of results in bioRxiv, which is an example of a preprint server, where that preprint culture in some academic disciplines is really catching on. But the same as the comments of the question of these people before of, yeah, I wish we could do longer reviews to get to a higher quality, is that I just saw a tweet from this afternoon, is that the people from bioRxiv, they've actually now added an extra banner as a warning, because so many people are now, even journalists are now going to these corona preprints, and they had to add this extra banner to say, okay, it's nice that it's up here so fast, but please watch out, this is a preprint that isn't reviewed by somebody else. So even though it's a positive initiative, bioRxiv itself could be abused by people that say, hey, I have proven that this homeopathic therapy works against 5 people that I treated with the coronavirus. I mean, it could be up there today, who knows. One angle on this and a problem is the embargo problem, that many publishers who publish today have 12 months or up to 24 months of embargo. And there's a big initiative driven by the scientific funders called Plan S, which really wants to bring that embargo to zero for the work that they fund. So that's a really encouraging trend. I don't know what the exact timeline will be, but let's be optimistic that in the next 5 years, from all of the funders that are in Plan S, that we will see zero embargo dates. So the next step is that I will bring this to kind of my world and to show you a little bit about the role of institutions and what they do with their institutional repositories in this field. By the way, I've heard the word repository mentioned so many different times today, all with different definitions, is that I will try to say institutional repository, and what I exactly mean by that is, for example, in the example of student thesis, is that a very famous repository is Apollo from Cambridge. And when they decided to put Stephen Hawking's thesis up there, I think it's last year or 2 years ago, they got so many downloads that their DSpace repository wasn't able to survive the load those first days. But today, if you go to it, you can access the thesis there together with the supplementary files. So this might have different colors. This is a typical DSpace repository where you can find the publications and the associated metadata accessible for anyone. And it doesn't stop at academia. So if you followed the news, I think it was last week, you have the annual recurring report from Oxfam, who report on inequality. And they as well, even though it's a different model where they write the papers without any involvement from publishing or review, they also put those PDFs and their metadata into a DSpace repository. It also doesn't stop at PDF or text-based materials. An example from the University of Exeter, I could open it up, but if you click that little View More button, then you can scroll for half a minute down, because this is actually one item that has 20 terabytes of data, all packaged up into zip files of 17 gigabytes. So if you put some storage solution under there, there is actually no theoretical limit as to how much data you can refer. Of course, the upload challenge, getting it in there, or the download is another story, but these 17 gigabyte packages seem to work pretty well. So the three examples before were all situations where the materials that are there are openly and accessible for download, but unfortunately, because of course, the academic privilege linked to high impact journals, it's still the case that the libraries who operate these repositories are still tied to the situation that their staff can also publish in journals that have embargoes. So for example, here HZI in Germany, they tend to submit the items and the PDFs as soon as possible, and you can see the embargo dates that are on there. So it's not just so you can go in your Google Calendar and say, aha, in November 2020, I will go back to the repository and I will get the paper. No. If you click on the download button, you get to the request a copy feature, and the request a copy feature is a technical feature around a privilege in academia that you as an individual researcher, wherever you have published, you can always share your work in a peer-to-peer fashion with your peers. So even though it's now a little bit more automated, that, okay, I can say I want access for a reason X or Y, it still requires an individual to say, yes, you get this copy, but it's a very, very effective way to just make sure that the metadata and the title and everything gets out there, and that if you press the button, wait a few days, you have a copy anyway, even though there's an embargo until November. So I've showed you different repositories and their URLs, and the best thing is that you as an interested user, you don't need to know these sites, you don't even need to know that they exist, because in the development of the DSpace project and also other repositories out there, we have very good relations with Google Scholar, who gives us a very hard job actually to keep our systems up for them, constantly hitting them with crawler traffic. But that's of course to make sure that they can reference both the metadata as well as the direct PDF links in Google Scholar. So if the system completely works, you just get the PDF straight from Google Scholar, completely oblivious that there is such a thing as institutional repositories that do all of this for you. So a little bit of history on the DSpace project, and one of the reasons that I try to submit to this day today is that I don't know why he does that. It's back. It's back. Normally, if it works, you shouldn't touch it, but I need to touch it to advance the slides. Is that as a community of over 12 years old, some of the original committers have moved on. It's like any project, everybody needs developers and contributors. So if you have some experience in Java or in Angular now, and if you hear something that is of interest, you're always welcome to join. But the reason why DSpace today is the most successful institutional repository platform is, in my opinion, because I don't know, maybe it was all just pure luck, is the fact that it had localization support very early in the process. So today there's a fork in China called CSpace. There is a whole range of installed repositories in Taiwan based of that localization support, and of course the MIT licensing that allows anybody to just do whatever they want with the software. I'm gonna go a little bit faster because I see that I only have 5 minutes left. I don't know where all that time went. But to talk about the DSpace 7 version and where we're going is, and also maybe as a learning of a project that is 10 years further, and a little bit in feedback to Antonin's question, like, yeah, how do we tackle with evolution of the platform and what do we allow, is that there used to be a tradition of time-based releases in DSpace where basically any contributor could contribute or suggest something before a feature freeze deadline. And if it didn't break other features, and if it was generally perceived as a good idea or not being in the way of somebody, any contribution could just get in there. So we started off in 2002 with one UI until Texas A&M University in the US decided, well, JSP UI, it's kind of getting old technology by now, and we want to have something that can give specific look and feel on specific collections. So they came up with a new UI. And it got accepted into the main line, but the problem at that point was there was not 100% feature parity with the old UI. So it had interesting features, but it was not convincing enough for the entire community to say, JSP UI, all of our customizations in the trash. So the bad thing it's bad or good, depends on how you look at it, is that since that point, the DSpace project has actually split its community into two. XML UI community and the JSP UI community, and I personally believe that's a bad thing because two groups of people that deal with the same problem space have been working on creating the same features or dealing with the same problems into these two different UIs. So that's why the new attempt on unifying these UIs also on a technology that is more modern and geared towards the future is that everybody was really on the same page of, we really want to create something that can replace the two of them for the entire community and not just create a third UI where we will have our community split up into three different groups. So that's also the reason why this has been a quite lengthy process if you see the timeline, and that we went in 2016 through a formal UI prototyping challenge where stakeholders in the community could say, we're fans of this technology, here are the use cases that we can build and demonstrate. And then we as a company, we contributed a prototype on Ember. But we joined in the discourse with the community and we all aligned together on another technology. So we threw away our own prototype in Ember and we aligned on the fact that we were all going to build this on Angular DSpace 7 together. So right now we're already on more code commits than some of the previous major releases combined, and we are really in this final stretch to get to the end. And there is one video here that if it works, that I can just show you a bit of the search feature. If I know how to put it full screen. Is basically like the whole approach towards faceted searching in metadata is made a lot more responsive thanks to the fact that with Angular we can break it up into all of these individual components and that they can get their data individually instead of always relying on more page loads to bring this data in. And maybe as a final thing, and hooking on to the story of the neuroscience presentations in the morning, is that one big evolution that we're bringing here is that instead of the rigid model of having metadata and a few objects that represent a paper or a data set, DSpace 7 will also have rich entities to kind of make an entity model of anything that makes sense in your context. So when we think about that data lad that we saw this morning, where it's like, okay, we want data sets and files, or some of these other neuro examples where it was a more intricate structure, is that we'll be able to build that whole representation of entities in DSpace 7, which is something that we're very excited about. So thank you very much for your attention today.
I want to talk briefly about definitions for open access, because it's used a lot. And there's a very good one called the Berlin Declaration, but you had Stephen Hawkins' PhD thesis that was at the university. They described it as open access, and I wrote to them and complained that it was copyrighted and it was free to download, but nothing else. And they wrote back, replied very politely and quickly, and said, no, here is a perfectly good definition of open access, and this particular use case complies. So do you have any views about the use of that term, or it's not very protected compared with, say, open source, which has a very rock solid OSI definition?
Yeah. So the question is what definitions, or the many definitions that are currently going around open access, how we can get around that problem and around that different understanding. And the major issue that I see with this is that actually some of the traditional publishers have co-opted the term of open access, and the fashion is that every year you add a new color or a new kind of substance in front of it. So you have green open access, gold, then you have diamond open access and whatever. And it's sometimes I feel like it's intentionally made to make it confusing and to make to put commercial offerings in there that seem like unique, or a twist on some things. But it's really a different thing where you say a result is free, that you can just access a result, or where you really have, for example, text and data mining rights, or some kind of reproducibility, or just that you can do more than it just with except for only the basic readership. So I'm not sure if we will end up in a situation where there will be one agreed definition of open access. Maybe you just have to find a very original color. You can say, this is pinkopenaccess.org. You make a website and you say, this is what it now means. And if you get enough traction, maybe pink open access is the future. Yeah.
Do you have a feature in the DSpace 7 to actually expose the bibliographic API for typically research lab websites, where they want to provide the bibliography of their researchers? Can you easily do that with DSpace?
Yeah. The question is whether DSpace 7 will have APIs, so bibliographies can be easily integrated in other websites. Absolutely. So in past versions, we already had a REST API that allowed this kind of behavior, so getting the publications by collection or community or authors. But we really decided that we want to eat our own dog food, and that DSpace 7 has to be, the new UI has to be a primary consumer of the REST API. So in DSpace 7, we are really exposing all of the business logic, including workflows, everything that you can imagine, the statistics on the downloads and everything. Everything is now also in the web UI, so in the REST API. So everything that the REST API can do as an application, you could also kind of transfer to or other applications by calling the REST API yourself.
It's a really simple question, and if you've answered it already, I apologize, but why is it called DSpace?
I've absolutely no idea why the software is called DSpace. It's just a name, but if you really go back in history, there's another package coming out of the University of Southampton called ePrints. So in the beginning, ePrints and DSpace were the two competitors, and it's actually the same software developer, and now his name just escapes me. The same person was at the start of both of them. Rob, I will add it to my page somewhere later. Thank you very much.